We have an individual that needs to say something. We've asked him to say something. He may be a little edgy about it, but a lot of the theme of this conference is keeping people alive, keeping firefighters alive. There's not many that live through a flashover. In this city, we're very fortunate in having one that has. An individual who's been on a fire department for 18 years, a captain for 8, and has experienced the flashover. And he's here to tell us about it. Please welcome Captain Mike Spalding of the Indianapolis Fire Department.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like for you to know that this is the first time I've spoken publicly about this experience. I've talked to my friends in small groups, but I really feel fortunate to share this with you. I would like to tell you a little bit about myself before I get started. My entire career has been spent in busy fire stations. I like those types of people. I like the kind of work that they did, and that's what I wanted to be a part of. My station was Station 7, which is in the downtown area in Indianapolis, and we specialized in a lot of heavy rescue work, rope rescue work, river rescue, scuba rescue. I was a scuba diver before my accident, and we had a heavy fire load, and it was I thrived on it. I enjoyed it. I liked the people. The challenge was satisfying. But on February 5th in 1992, we responded to a call for help at the Indianapolis Athletic Club. They said there was smoke in the lobby, and that it was a kind of a called-in alarm. They didn't have a central alarm system. So this was a little bit after midnight, and I was already had a full day. I had spent part of the day training, the other part of the day with the guys on a pretty sizable commercial working fire. So I was getting ready for bed, and the alarm came in, and we went to it, and I had a sub on my apparatus at the time. His name was John Lorenzano, and John was a sub with about 3.5 years experience, very little experience, you know, by our standards, and he was the 5th man on my truck. I was on aerial number 7, 135-foot aerial truck, and John rode in the front seat next to me, and he was partnered with me. He followed me wherever I went. So we arrived, nothing was showing on the outside of the building, and so we went inside. We were the first crews to go inside, and we found a real heavy black smoke coming out of a big ventilation duct, and we couldn't find out the location of it, and the alarm system wasn't such that it really pinpointed the location, so we had to search. The chief sent myself and John, along with several other crews, to the basement and sub-basement area of this building. Now, this building is a 9-story structure that has, was built in 1922, been remodeled several times. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with that kind of a building. But so John and I went to search the basement. We went through the basement and found light smoke, no heat, fire. Radio traffic was a little bit disrupted because we were, you know, a couple floors below the surface. Well, when we came up the steps, we saw that the smoke was starting to get a little heavy in the lobby area, and the chief told us that they had found the fire on the 3rd floor and to proceed up and help them out. So we went to work. We went up the steps to the 3rd floor, and as we were going up the steps, the fire crews were bringing some victims down. This was like a social club hotel type of a structure, and they were bringing people down, and these people were coughing, hacking. They were in distress. They were being rescued. So John and I stayed to the outside of the stairwell, and as we got up just almost to the 3rd floor, we stopped. I turned around and told John, put your mask on, stay close. And it was about a little closer than her and I, and John looked me in the eye and he nodded. I mean, this is a young guy, very sharp, young family, had a brand new baby. He is college educated. He was also social worker on his off day. So, I mean, he was a good man. People liked him a lot. I was good friends with his family and his brother, who was a policeman for the Indianapolis Police Department. But John and I looked at each other, nodded, and we went to work. When we got to the third floor, the smoke was banking down. It was dark. It was real dark, and we could see that the hose lines were already snaking into well, farther than we could see. And excuse me. So we got low, below the smoke, and started following the hose lines in. And there were some crews already working in the area. We could hear them. And as we got in, I mean, it was a little bit warm, but it wasn't untenable. You know, we could deal with it. We were on air. We were down low. Our job was to go in, pull ceilings, ventilate, search for victims, do the latter type of work. So as we went in through the elevator lobby, around the corner into a large area called the McHale dining room, followed the hose, kept with the hose, listening to the people and the sounds of everything that was going on. And as we got outside of what was the bar room, which naturally we couldn't see, didn't know exactly what it was, but that was the fire room. And we didn't see any fire. Evidently the fire had been knocked down. That's what we were gathering. But, I mean, the smoke was thick. I mean, it was thick and it was dark. And I ran into another firefighter. His name is Woody Galenius. Woody was over 20 years on, had more time on the job than I had. He was also stationed at downtown company number 13 on the ladder truck. And he was experienced. He knew what he was doing. He came out and he didn't have his helmet on. He was kind of stumbling. It was obvious he was in distress. You know, he was obviously in distress. So first priority is Woody. So I grabbed hold of Woody's arm, tried to pull him down closer to the floor. John and I made the turn, followed the hose line back out. You know, we'd come back later and work on the fire, but we were going to take him out. As we're following the hose line out, the smoke gets darker. It gets real dark. And it got to the point where I had my flashlight, plus I had a helmet light on, and they didn't do anything. You know, it was just pitch black. And then the conditions abruptly changed. And I'd never seen anything like this. You know, as I mentioned, I've fought a lot of fires in different types of buildings, in all kinds of weather, all kinds of combustibles, and I thought I'd seen a lot. I thought I'd seen enough that I could deal with whatever the hell happened, and I could take care of my crew or whatever the hell happened. But as I said, I mean, this thing abruptly changed, and to this day I'm still amazed that this happened. But it was, the heat just came in like a blast furnace, and in the darkness I could see little orange flickers around, and the heat was unbelievable. Unbelievable. It was like, it felt like your fire coat was going to catch on fire. And I was, at that time in '92, I was one of the many firefighters in the job, the majority of the guys that didn't wear hoods, because we thought we could judge heat by the temperature of our ears. But my ears were telling me it was hot. I heard my ears sizzle. I've never heard anything like that except for when I throw bacon in the skillet. I heard my ears sizzle. I was driven to the floor. I mean, we were low, but I was driven flat on the floor. And I grabbed my radio, tried to make some calls for help, hit the emergency button, institute an emergency, because I knew enough that I knew we weren't going to get out of there without help. It's absolutely, well, for one thing, it was disorienting because it was dark. The heat from this flashover was like a blast furnace, and that causes you to turn into an instinct-driven animal. And I've seen people in videos that jumped out of windows, and I wonder, what the hell were they thinking about? You know, we could have saved them. Or I totally empathize with that feeling now. If there had been a window there, I would have jumped out of it. I don't care if it was the 3rd floor, which is what we were on, or the 9th floor. I would have jumped out of it. But as I was down on the floor, I knew that we had to get out. With my hand, I felt No John, no Woody, no hose line. And it was, like I said, just orange flickers in the blackness, in this pitch blackness. So I dove between the blackness. I mean, I could have been a wall. I don't know. What it ended up being is, as I found out later, we were in the elevator lobby, and we were, that's where, unfortunately, the stairwell was there, but there was no way to tell exactly where we were. And when I dove, I ended up diving down a hallway, and which led to another part of the building. This was a fairly large structure. And I crawled along there trying to make radio transmissions out that we needed help. They weren't real audible, and I kind of prided myself on being able to give decent radio transmissions. But hey, when you're in a bad situation, it's amazing what you'll do and what you'll say. But I ended up crawling down that hallway, trying to get out of there, trying to find some kind of cooler place, some place where I could regroup, where I could survive. But it was hopeless. I found my energy being drained quickly. And at the time, I worked out 3 and 4 times a week. You know, I didn't smoke, still don't. I didn't drink excessively. I led a pretty healthy lifestyle, and I felt like I was physically fit enough to do the job. But this fire took it out of me in seconds. And I was trapped. I could hear debris falling around me, but I couldn't see anything. I had no idea where I was. And I could hear that stuff falling. It sounded like being in the middle of a fireplace. And finally, the ceiling collapsed on top of me. I was so burned at the time, I didn't know that until later they told me when they found me. But I think one of the most shocking things of that whole experience at that moment was that I could hear the other firefighters calling for help, and there wasn't anything I could do. There wasn't a thing I could do. I couldn't even, my mic on my radio was down, and I'd long since lost it. And when you're subjected to that kind of heat, you just don't function very well as far as those fine motor skills. I went through 3 distinct phases during that flashover period, from the time it happened until the time they got me out. And I say this with all sincerity. When it first happened, I prayed for God for help. And I prayed for God to, get me the hell out of here. Whatever it takes, get me out. And then as I was trying to get the hell out of there, I started praying for forgiveness, because I knew this didn't look good. This didn't look good at all. I prayed for forgiveness. And then after that ceiling collapsed on top of me, I prayed to die. And I never thought of myself as a person that gave up. I always got up and kept trying. But it was unbearable. But for my good luck, my good fortune, a lieutenant by the name of Tom Arthur came in through the windows and started putting the fire out with his crew. And he was working in this large dining room where I was in the far end of it, under this pile of ceiling rubble. And they knocked the fire down. They were working in this area, and Tom heard something that sounded human, because the way he described it, off some distance from where his line would reach. And the situation was far from controlled at this time, and Tom made the decision to go in that direction to find out who was trapped there. He thought it was a civilian. And his crew member told me that he said that it scared the hell out of him to leave that line to go into this mess to start searching for somebody, but he trusted Tommy. Tommy was a very experienced, very well decorated officer on the Indianapolis Fire Department. So he followed him, and Tommy went over there, and he saw my boot sticking out from underneath this debris. He threw the debris off, and he said he pulled my mask up and off, and he didn't recognize me. And Tom and I, he worked in an adjoining company. We ran in together, worked on many fires. In fact, we had a fire that very same day prior to this incident. And he didn't recognize me. He asked me who I was. And my consciousness at this point is, I remember bits and pieces of it. But he was shocked when he found out it was me, because the fire coat was burned up, the helmet was melted. And he told me he thought I was a black guy, because I tried to get my mask away to call for help during this. But the guys got me out of there, and the crews, all the crews that worked there that came in that second wave to knock this fire down, because, you know, I owe them a debt of gratitude, a debt I'll never be able to repay them. But there were 2 other firefighters, Ann Comparrott and Greg Gates, were also rescued out of that building. And there were a lot of other firefighters that got burns and a variety of injuries when this thing took off on us. But I can never repay those guys, you know, for saving my life. And I've heard civilians come into the fire station and talk to us like that, and, you know, it makes you feel good, but, you know, it's part of your job. But until you've been the person that had to be rescued, you don't know. You don't know how wonderful it is to have that feeling. And but unfortunately, Woody Galenius and John Lorenzano died in the fire. They were found in 2 different locations in the building. And man, it's something's pretty profound, because I was the one that was last with them. And I was the last one to talk to John, you know. It's pretty, you know, it's a pretty profound moment. But I want to continue with my story and tell you a little bit more about what the results of a flashover are, which was going to the hospital and being wheeled into the emergency room and hearing the doctors talk around you. I mean, I couldn't see anything, but I'd been there before. I'd heard ambulance crews, you know, I'd gone in with ambulance crews to work on people, and I thought I was a black smoldering mess. I thought my chances of survival were pretty nil. And the ER doc, they all talked like, you know, I couldn't even hear them, but I could pick up bits and pieces. But I heard after they had, of course, they had all my clothes stripped off, and they had started catheters and IVs and all the medical stuff, but they stuck a laryngoscope down my throat. And I heard the doc, because his mouth was right by my head, he said, his airway's okay. It's not burned. And I knew then my chances of survival were real good. I'd heard that before in the emergency room. But they knocked me out, and I woke up late the next day, and I was on morphine, and they had me intubated, and it was a horrible experience. Even with all the heavy-duty drugs, it was a horrible experience. And they told me later that I ended up pulling the tube out, excavating myself. And all I can remember I was in and out at that point, but that little bitty tube was like trying to breathe through a tiny straw. And it was horrible. You know, I don't know how I ever pulled it out, but they said I did. But I went into the burn unit. I spent 3 weeks in the burn unit, and at that time, the first part of it was just horrendous. It was surreal. They took me in to an area where they do the debriding, because I had pretty severe burns. I had burns on both my hands, my arms, my back, my ears, the top of my head, the sides of my face, on my leg, and it was 2nd and 3rd degree burns, about 24% overall. And there was some extensive grafting that had to be done. But getting back to this debriding room, what an experience. They'd take me in, they'd lift me up off this cot, an electric hoist on a gurney. And I'm not a big guy, about 165, but I mean, the nurses were all around me. They raised me up, and then they'd rotate me over just like moving an engine to put it in a car or a truck, and they lowered me down in this big stainless steel tank filled with water. And the stainless steel tank was called the butterfly tank because it was shaped like a butterfly. And I lay in that tank with the feet low, and I was up to my chest in water. And the nurses went to work on me, cleaning and trimming. I was a mess. I mean, all my fingernails were black. My fingertips were black. Skin was hanging off of me. It was raw. It looked like hamburger. And they worked on cleaning me up because of the infection, those problems. And I learned something about burn recovery that I'd never known, and I really feel embarrassed about that, the fact that I'm a fireman and I don't really realize what some of these burn victims have gone through in their recovery. But when skin is severely burned, it turns into a white, kind of a off-white, leathery type of a substance called escar. And that escar is tenacious. It sticks on the skin, and it will not come off. They use Silvadine to try and melt this stuff away, but what they'll do if that doesn't happen is they take tweezers and a scalpel, and they trim under this eschar. Now, right under this eschar is your nerves. And it brought tears to my face every time they worked on that. But it has to come off. It's got to come off. But I'm on the road to recovery. They're working on me, and the second week they've got me trying to feed myself, and they've got all the utensils padded, heavily padded, because I'm kind of bandaged up in pretty much a mess. But my shaver's padded, and they're wanting me to do more and more and more for myself, of course. And every time I dropped food, or every time I dropped a utensil, it was a reminder of how helpless I was and how vulnerable I was. And it was a pretty scary feeling. The feeling of vulnerability is incredible. Going from a firefighter who's used to the action, used to going in fires, the first one in, we were cautious and aggressive, but we were there to do the job. From that to a guy that sits in his hospital room and sees all these cards that they're putting on the wall, and I'm looking at these cards thinking, if one of those cards catches on fire, this whole damn room's going to be on fire. And I made him take them down. I said, I can't take the chance. But as I healed, they sent me down to occupational therapy, and they sent me down to start building up my strength. And they put me on a bicycle, stationary bicycle, and this bicycle had a padded seat. And I asked for more padding. I had burns in places that you shouldn't have burns, let me put it that way. It made some of the most basic chores of life pretty difficult. So I'm on the bicycle, and I'm riding the bicycle, and I'm surveying the room, just looking at the people that were in there. And there were children and adults in there, and one guy was having a new prosthesis put on his leg, and he's learning how to walk on it. And there was a kid with braces, and there's another woman that was laying on this table that they were trying to get to come out of this fetal position. And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, everybody's fighting their own battles here. And I'm on this bicycle, and it was good therapy for me, because I looked at these people and I thought, we've all got our uncertainties to deal with, and we've all don't know what our level of recovery is going to be. And I dedicated myself at that time that I was coming back, that I was not going to be crippled up. They weren't cutting my fingers off. There's no damn way that's going to happen. So I turned that into my job. I went after it with a fever, and that continued. After I was out of the hospital, I talked him into letting me out of the hospital a couple of weeks early with the promise I'd do all the workouts, I'd do the bandage changes, I'd do all of that, and which I did. And then after the skin healed, after a couple months of this bandaging daily and washing between the bandages, and these bandage changes took about an hour and a half each time and were very painful. But they fitted me with pressure garments, so you get through one tough time and you get into another tough time. And the pressure garments, for any of you that don't know what they are a custom-made elastic synthetic garment that you wear right next to your skin, and it reduces the hypertrophic scarring. And what it does is it just helps you heal better. So I went through that, and it was very difficult, very painful. It's like wearing your little brother's underwear and shirt 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But somehow I made it through. They did reconstructive surgery on my ears. Took about 6 operations. They did scalp reduction surgery, which was horrendous. I went through 9 operations all total. All of my doctors, all of the surgeons told me that I was a remarkable healer. I had hypertrophic scarring on the side of my face. They used injections to reduce that. It was horrendous. There was things I never knew about, that I knew levels of pain. But I got through it. I'm here today to share it with you. But I had one of the best support groups in the world, I'm happy to say, and that's the firefighters. are the best. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. My family and loved ones stood by me through thick and thin. Mayor Goldsmith and the entire city administration, they were there. You know, they were there. Chief Keith Smith and the entire fire department administration were incredibly supportive and helpful. And President Hannafy of Local 416, the executive board, and all my brother and sister firefighters were at the best. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. They did everything for me. But you know, the most remarkable part about it was all the civilians who sent me cards and letters from all over the country, and the outpouring of support that they gave not only me but firefighters in general. I've saved all those cards and I'll always keep them, and there are over 3,000 of them. You know, it's a sad moment when a firefighter becomes a fire victim. You know, it's like all the courage, the equipment, the training can't overcome some things that are unforeseen, some things that they just happen. But I think if John and Woody were here with me, other than saying, "You talk long enough, Mike, get the hell off the stage," they'd probably, I think they'd be very supportive of the safety that we're trying to improve on the fire departments. One more quick note as I wrap this up. I'd like to mention that John Lorenzano's family and Woody Glenius' family were very supportive of me. They did not hold me personally responsible for their deaths, and I cannot tell you how important that was to me. But the message to all of you guys and ladies, the message or challenge I've got to you is to be professional, to do your job to the best of your ability, to fight the battles necessary to protect your firefighters, and to make your job as safe as it can possibly be, so that if it happens to you someday, a dead member of your fire department, their family comes up to you and says, "I don't blame you, you did your best." I hope you hear that. Thank you.